what we're seeing now is an epidemic where a number of men are suffering from low testosterone.
What are the dangers of low testosterone?
Most guys will think of testosterone as just the hormone that builds muscle and gets you shredded, but testosterone really does fuel motivation, and so we're seeing a number of consequences associated with low testosterone, such as...
Do you want endless energy, unshakable drive, and laser-like focus?
Then look no further than Australia's leading biohacker,
Lucas Aoun.
He'll give you the best herbs, supplements, and foods
For better sleep, sex, recovery, and energy.
There's sort of like quotes and estimates that in 33 years from now, all men in the Western world will be infertile.
Shit. What are some things then that are causing that?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors here. Number one would be, from a pretty young age, I understood that if I can upregulate my dopamine receptors and keep them high for a long period of time, then I'm always going to be very sensitive to stimulants. And I've always wanted to be like that, because I'm like, or if I want to be performing 150% above baseline, then I have a brain that is hypersensitive to stimulants. The premature ejaculation, what happens here is there are some key neurotransmitters that are actually too high that can actually evoke early ejaculation.
And what about on the flip side, erectile dysfunction?
Yeah, it's a great question. So
what are the dangers of low testosterone in men?
yeah, so what we're seeing now is an epidemic where a number of men are suffering from low testosterone, and some of the repercussions are quite significant. Most guys will think of testosterone as just the hormone that builds muscle and gets you shredded, but testosterone really does fuel like motivation. It governs like resilience, and what I would call is like the adaptive hormone. It's the hormone that men want to keep high. All the way up until 80, 90 years of age. And so we're seeing a number of consequences associated with low testosterone, such as low mood, lack of energy, low motivation, poor discipline, they can't recover from exercise, low libido, no morning wood. So yeah, it's a very significant matter that should be taken pretty seriously.
So with some of those factors there as well, like the difference between, total testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone, binding globulin, and things like that. Does that play a role, or is it just kind of total that is the main thing that people should be looking for?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at hormones, just like we do in women, it's actually a balance between all of the different hormones. So it's what I call is like the orchestra. Like every single component within the orchestra needs to be at what I call the optimal reference range. And now if you go to your regular doctor, most doctors will just say, even if your result falls within that reference range, they'll say, yep, your results are completely fine. Like there's nothing wrong with you. But as you and I know, like there's a sweet spot for all of these different hormones, and total testosterone is one of them. But then we have like DHT, prolactin, estrogen, sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, free testosterone. So they all come into play, and we need to look at the whole picture when we're trying to optimize health.
Is there like a general rule of thumb or something that a ratio or something that people are looking for? Or is it kind of person dependent as well?
It's really, man, it's a good question. It's very individualized. Like you may respond fine sitting at 700 total testosterone, whereas I personally need to be at like 950, for example, to feel my best.
Yeah. And what are some things then that are causing that massive decrease?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors here. I guess number one would be in the general average everyday person, it would be a sedentary lifestyle. So like working in here.
We'll keep it quiet.
Lack of sunlight.
Yep.
Crappy diets like processed foods and refined carbohydrates. BPA is another one, obviously, like plastic, eating and drinking from plastic.
So is that like, because a lot of people, you go, oh, cool, I'm smashing my meal prep, which is a really positive thing to do, obviously. Maybe, it's still better than not doing that, but then they're slamming it in a plastic container and heating up their food in that. Is that what?
Yeah, and then obviously what happens is the plastic leaches into the food, and, over time what happens is, even though it's like a really small amount, it starts to actually like bind to these androgen receptors, and they can block the androgen receptors, meaning that the testosterone that you're producing can't actually navigate and bind to its receptor, which means that it's basically inactive.
Okay. So is that when then you're seeing someone may have decent testosterone, but it's not useless, but it's borderline useless testosterone. Like it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing because of things like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what are there? I think you've talked about even like different underwears and things like that. What are some of the nitty gritties that are causing some of these other issues?
A big one that you mentioned there is actually a number of men are wearing like polyester underwear, and it's very common, man. Like it's not easy for a guy to know whether or not he should be wearing that. Like not many guys are going to check, the material of their freaking underwear. Like
Cheap ones done, thanks.
just bit it.
Yeah.
Like polyester underwear has been shown to, like a good example of this is, when you're wearing like a polyester t-shirt and you take it off and it gives you the electrostatic shocks, the little charges.
Yep.
What happens is when you're wearing that underwear, you're actually like that's happening up against your testes, and it's causing micro amounts of electrostatic shocks to the testes, and that can cause it can actually cause complete infertility in some cases.
Bloody hell. So is that a more recent finding that they've come across, or this has been something that they've been seeing in like human studies for a while now?
The study that I was focused on was back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So back in the early 90s, we knew about this like detrimental effect.
Yeah. It's interesting that how like we can know about things and not really, we'll be like, yeah, but we'll just do it anyway, because I guess the modern world is the convenience sort of factor. And like I just mentioned before, it's like, oh, but they're generally probably going to be the cheaper underwear, much like the plastic container is cheaper than buying the glass one, and all these other factors. We always lean into like the short-term, easier option rather than opting for the long-term, better option as well.
Yeah.
I imagine that's pretty common. You see that.
Oh, all the time, man. All the time.
Yeah. So estrogen then, in that, amongst obviously they're kind of seen as like, I guess in the general world, people go polar opposites. Right. You go men, testosterone, women, estrogen, but with the understanding that, a lot of people might not understand this, that estrogen is still a good thing for a bloke to have. Where's that line drawn though? Like when is it good? How much of it is good? What does it do?
Yeah, it's a really important point you bring up, because a number of men probably perceive estrogen as the female hormone, and that men should not have estrogen. It's not true. In fact, some of testosterone's benefits actually come from its conversion into estrogen via that aromatase enzyme. So just to put it simply, like every single guy is producing estrogen, a really small amount. And what happens is we run into issues when estrogen is too high relative to testosterone. So when estrogen is like estrogen dominant, you see like gynecomastia, like man boobs, puffiness, carrying water retention, moodiness. But if I can personally like share my experience here. Like I personally went on a quest a couple of years ago. I deliberately tried to lower my estrogen as low as possible using like my knowledge around herbal medicine, supplementation and stuff. And let me tell you this, Jordan, like it definitely wasn't a great outcome. Like I felt my joints started like they were quite painful. I was feeling like moody. I lost morning wood. I felt terrible. And that's when I learned the hard way. You know?
So what were some of those things that because someone may be doing those things to then realize, oh shit, maybe I'm going too far with it as well?
Yeah. So what I did was I created like a stack, and that's what I'm pretty well known for is building stacks and creating protocols. So what I did was I researched what are the most potent aromatase inhibitors, like natural aromatase inhibitors. So I came across a few different compounds. One of them is zinc. So I was taking high dose zinc. I was taking tonkat Ali because tonkat Ali has been shown to lower aromatase. I was stacking that with calcium D-glucarate, which helps to clear out estrogen. And then what else was I doing? I was taking a few other compounds, and that full synergy there led to a state of like low estrogen symptoms, of which I thought I'd feel like Superman, but I definitely didn't feel great.
Yeah, you lost that balance then, didn't you? Or that like quote unquote ratio of it as well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like I just said to you before, like I've worked with Ben, who's been on the podcast, to do my blood work and look through all those things. And just the understanding of like what to take, like someone hears, oh, you took zinc and it did that. It's like, it's not to say zinc's a bad thing to take, but it's understanding what you need to take and talking to someone that actually knows what they're talking about to give the advice around the supplementation as well. Because it's so easy. People just blanket term. Vitamin D is probably a great one. And I don't know to what extent like you can just get away with it. But like most people just go, oh, just take vitamin D. Or they say, oh, zinc's good for this, magnesium's good for that. And you look at their cupboard and they're just taking it for the sake of it, but which could be shooting themselves in the foot.
And also to that point, Jordan, is like the timing, like supplementation timing. It's a really important one because we see a number of people using supplements at the wrong time of the day. Like, for example, vitamin D, a number of people have been told by their doctors it's completely fine if you take it before bed, but this is not ideal. We want to be taking vitamin D in the morning.
Okay.
You know, the sun rises in the morning and the sun goes at night. So that's just another...
Makes sense. Yeah. So like do you still get, if you are taking, like say, to people understanding like the dieting thing is maybe a little bit of a relatable concept. It's like meal timing, protein timing, it helps, but it's not the be all and end all. Like you're still going to reap a lot of the reward of protein if you eat a decent amount over the course of the whole day, calories over the course of the whole week or something like that. The macro sense less than just the micro. Do you still get the benefits of those supplements? You're just quote unquote wasting some of the potential?
Yeah. That's you'd still retain some of the benefits. Like you're still going to top up your vitamin D levels, but what's going to happen is the downstream consequence would be impaired sleep quality because you're taking it at nighttime. So it's sort of like, how do we get the best bang for buck for different supplements? And it really is an art and a skill, and that's sort of where my expertise lies. Is like creating these supplementation protocols that are personalized for people to feel and operate their best. Yeah,
which generally people probably steer clear of because they go, I want the cheap, convenient option once again, which if you're getting one-on-one is going to be that premium service, but it's likely what people need as well, which is a challenge. Now, there's some factors there that may cause some decreases in testosterone, the lifestyle factors and things like that. How can then people obviously improve the things we just mentioned, but are there other things that people can be doing diet-wise, exercise-wise, supplement-wise, as a general rule, plus obviously then looking into the specifics?
Definitely from a nutrition perspective, I always like to sort of start with diet because let me just put this out there. Vegan diet is not going to be conducive to boosting testosterone. I've seen blood work time and time again. And so what we want to be focusing on is like pretty much contrary to what you hear in the news and things like that. Avoid saturated fat. It's bullshit, man. Like saturated fat is what we need because it's oftentimes rich in cholesterol as well, like these saturated fat foods like meat and eggs and things like that. These foods contain nutrients that are highly bioavailable, meaning that we can extract and utilize them to our, to the best advantage. And then if we look at the carbohydrate perspective, we really want to be focusing on easy to digest carbohydrates. So we're talking like, white rice, easy to digest, quick and easy. Fruits generally for most people are pretty easy to digest, particularly the berries. And then from like a fat perspective, I sort of mentioned saturated fats, but also like things like olive oil, avocados, coconut oil, macadamias, all the foods that you probably eat regularly as well.
Yeah, okay. So the quote unquote healthy fats that people kind of see. So then I can very easily understand why people also media plus, you hear the word cholesterol there and you kind of go, oh, but that's bad, isn't it? But so where does that become a good thing? Like, how does that work?
So the cholesterol issue is only usually an issue in an individual who has, number one, a family history of cardiovascular disease, or number two, they've got high cholesterol alongside high insulin and high blood sugar. If we've got those three happening in the one scenario, that's when we're going to start to see like issues with like metabolic syndrome and potentially increasing their risk of various diseases. But I mean, I've sort of worked with guys that have been on like the carnivore diet and their cholesterol levels are above the reference range. But their insulin's low and their blood sugars are low. And it's like, and their homocysteine's low and their C-reactive protein's low. It's like, is it really a bad thing? I don't think so.
What about the conversation of then like say a fiber or something like that within the carnivore diet? It seems to be a common thing that people go, where are you getting that from?
I personally, and this is a great point, fiber I personally think is important. Like I think we need to be, prioritizing it. And the way that I prioritize it is actually, I mean, obviously I'm eating a rich, diverse diet. I'm not on a carnivore diet. I'm on a pretty like balanced diet right now.
Which is weird these days, isn't it? Like you walk down the street, ask someone what's a balanced diet, they're like, well, I don't know.
So I would say like from a fiber perspective, like one of the best fibers that, I don't see anyone talking about. Most people talk about like psyllium husks as like a, good fiber. This is 10 times better than psyllium. It's called PHGG, partially hydrolyzed guar gum. And the benefit of this is you can literally sprinkle this over the top of any food,
Okay.
and you won't even be able to tell that you're adding fiber to your food. It's just awesome.
Where does that come from? Is that a plant?
It's a plant from the guar gum plant.
Okay,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
And so they've just refined it down and just put it into like a powder form.
yeah, which is like fully water soluble. So if you mix it in
Yep.
water, like you just shot it back and like, did I just have 5 grams of fiber?
Shit, that's pretty handy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is that something that like, say carnivores that are like, I don't want to eat fruits, veg, whatever, like that's something you're like, yeah, but let's just slide this one in if we can. Like
I
there's,
try my best.
yeah, I mean, they're pretty stubborn bunch like the vegans, I imagine. Like it's, and that's what I guess, like is we've got, I mean, it comes in waves, doesn't it, in society? Like the vegan trend, it's still very much a thing, but it's very much now we've gone the complete opposite. And, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the time people just need to go, we've got these extremes, find our place in the middle. If you're carnivore, maybe add some fruit and veg. If you're vegan, maybe add some meat. Happy days.
Yeah. No,
Like
I
you-
definitely agree with that.
You're going to cover some decent bases, I imagine. In
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. We've mentioned the microplastics, the underwear. How much does stress, cortisol, and all those things play a role into someone's testosterone or ability to perform on a daily basis?
Yeah. So the best way to like explain this is hopefully your audience has heard of like the autonomic nervous system, you know, the parasympathetic and sympathetic balance. So what happens is the way I perceive the parasympathetic nervous system is it's the rest, sex, and digest side of the nervous system. And then the sympathetic is like you're in the gym.
Yeah.
Like you're pushing weights. Like it's activating the adrenal glands, it's activating cortisol release. Now, what happens is if an individual is stuck in that sympathetic mode, let's say they've finished a workout. Well, let's just say they had a pre-workout before their workout.
Yeah.
Full of caffeine, full of stimulants, just gets the adrenals going, gets the catecholamines firing. Amazing for your workout. But what happens if that individual is stuck in that state for the following 6 to 8 hours, which is usually how long a pre-workout would last? They're stuck in that sort of like fight or flight mode. And that's going to compromise the body's, it's basically will shift the body's resources towards producing these stress hormones and not building the anabolic androgenic hormones like testosterone.
So is that because of the high dosage of caffeine, not just caffeine as a standalone stimulant, like an espresso, 80 milligrams of caffeine or something, versus the 450 milligram jacked pre-workout where you're just absolutely blind off the gills?
Usually it's like it's going to be more pronounced from a pre-workout. If some individuals are sensitive to caffeine, even just like, you know, 1 cup of coffee could tip them over to the point where they're just like, they can't switch off that sympathetic mode. But, you know, it's pretty easy to like shift the body back into that parasympathetic state. You can use compounds like taurine, magnesium, glycine, like some pretty amazing phosphatidylserine, L-theanine. Like there's a range of amino acids and supplements that can do a pretty good job at like, you know, bringing back balance.
Yeah. Is that why a lot of like your energy drinks and your pre-workouts have definitely taurine? It's like smack bang labeled over the whole thing, which is interesting because like growing up, like I come from a very healthy family, and taurine was one of those things that was like, oh, but it's got that in it. Like you could, these labels of these quote unquote what seem to be artificial compounds or whatever. So, but that's actually a good thing that those energy drinks have taurine in them.
Man, they are smart when they're formulating these products. I've actually said to my girlfriend the other day, I'm like, I want to find out who the formulator for Red Bull was, because like that guy must have been he was switched on.
Yeah,
man.
and that's back decent time now as
I
well.
think he's from Austria. Like it's a long time ago.
He's
But
been cooking in a lab since he was a kid.
it's probably been. I don't even know if somebody wants to look up Red Bull when it was formulated. It would have been 1930s, 40s, 50s. I don't know.
Shit, really?
It's been around for a long time.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. Then he was cooking that up from a young age. So the taurine, then, if someone's having like high caffeine, but they're not having the energy drinks and things like that, they looking at maybe supplementing with this during the bouts of high caffeine intake.
Absolutely. I mean, looking at like the most recent, you know, clinical trial on taurine, simply adding 3 grams of taurine into your daily stack or routine is going to potentially help you live longer.
Interesting.
Because it helps with it's like what they call like a geroprotective agent, which is pretty cool.
Is some of that also, like we've said before, dependent on the other things you're consuming as well as to whether that's a good idea, or it is a bit of a blanket, should be okay?
In general, I can't really see any major contraindications for like the gen pop.
Yeah.
Like if I had to like pick a compound to add to the water supply,
Yeah.
it'd probably be taurine.
Fuck the fluoride, put the taurine in sort of thing.
Well, taurine actually blocks the negative effects of fluoride.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So then do you still get, so like the fluoride, like they claim it's obviously got the benefits for like your teeth or whatever it is and things like that. Would you still get those foreseen benefits, or are you saying also there's just no need for the fluoride either?
What would happen is the taurine, so you know how fluoride's considered like neurotoxic in high amounts.
Yeah.
What happens is the taurine blocks the neurotoxic effects of fluoride.
Interesting.
It's not going to block the benefits you'd get from like enamel
Yeah.
tooth health perspective.
But it's more once it's deeper within your system as well.
Yeah.
So is that like, I mean, because fluoride is in the water supply, is that pretty much why it's there for people's teeth? Is that why they plan to put it in there?
It's the main reason. I'm not a sort of, dentist
Yeah.
in that regard, but I've spoken to a few biological dentists,
Yeah.
and they've all sort of said they're mixed opinions, man.
Yeah.
Some are saying it's important, others are saying no, it's not.
It's interesting because like people, I feel like, there's the absolute extremists on the internet everywhere, aren't they? They're like, they're trying to kill you by putting fluoride in the water. And it's just like, oh, I mean, we're not dying at 20. So, it may not be the worst thing in the world, but it's interesting to hear that it may not also be the best thing for us. Much like some of these other things that get put through our foods and things like that as well. It's a pretty consistent sort of theme. How much does testosterone come into the conversation of fertility for men?
That's a really important topic because there's sort of like quotes and estimates that in 33 years from now, all men in the Western world will be infertile.
Shit.
Which is like freeze the sperm, lads.
Get it out now while you can.
I'd say this is an important, like many different factors are contributing to that. Like testosterone is obviously going to be a sort of byproduct and an effect on fertility. A lot of the hacks and the strategies and the biohacks that I share, a lot of the things that I share around testosterone optimization actually have the benefit of also supporting fertility.
Yep.
So like what I'm trying to educate to men is like get healthy, and as a result of that, testosterone will go up, and so will fertility.
Yep. So is that like is there like a measure that people are looking for, sperm count, sperm quality, all these sort of things that they can go get tested for? Like, listen to next week's episode with Holly if you're interested in that, because she'll talk on the female side of things. But obviously the male comes into the equation of fertility as well. Like if you're seeing, if people are struggling to fall pregnant, then start to look at the male. What are they looking for then in some of those tests?
Yep. So from a male perspective, obviously doing a sperm analysis is going to be crucial, and basically identifying sperm count, sperm motility, viability, like progressive formation, morphology, different elements of like sperm quality. So if we're looking at that aspect there, it's really important that men, if they want to get their fertility checked, at least doing it once every 6 months is usually a good strategy.
Yep.
I mean, I've personally worked with guys who have like started at like 12 million sperm count. And after being on the full protocol that I've sort of like prescribed, which I've pretty much outlined on, it's trtfree.com. That's like our gold package course for testosterone optimization. That protocol there enabled him to boost his sperm count like 3 to 4 fold in a 6 month period.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty handy, I imagine, if he ever wants to have kids. So, what and then testosterone, how it affects building muscle, and things like that. A similar conversation.
Yeah. So testosterone is definitely like an anabolic, hormone. It is important for muscle growth. It's not the only hormone. There's obviously growth hormone and IGF-1 and a few other like regulators. Obviously testosterone is going to play a role. Let's just say this. You compare two guys doing the exact same training program, eating the same way, but one guy has like, let's say 1,000 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone. The other guy has like 400 nanograms. The guy with 1,000 nanograms per deciliter will very likely have a better body composition, less body fat, and more muscle mass.
So is that you could like those other things as well, the growth hormone and other factors, are they increased in a similar way to testosterone, or are they a separate story now?
It's a good question. There are separate strategies to boost like growth hormone and IGF-1.
Yeah.
Whereas like you're looking at testosterone, it's more specific to that particular pathway.
So what, like for growth hormone, what are IGF-1 was I think you mentioned as well. What are some of the things that you could be doing to try and get them up?
Yep. So, sauna usage has been shown to boost growth hormone pretty significantly. Also, intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Although some people would say intermittent fasting is catabolic, like you just
can't get my cows in that way.
Like I'm here to boost growth hormone, but I'm catabolic at the same time.
Yeah. It's like which is better?
Yeah, I think there are some other things as well, like L-arginine on an empty stomach can give you a transient boost in growth hormone. Whether or not that would translate to any noticeable effect is questionable. And then you got compounds like ibutamoren, which is MK677. Like that is an orally active growth hormone releasing hormone. Like it's a secretagogue. And that one there, a number of guys that I've worked with say that really does help with like putting on size and building muscle. So there's a few things that men can do to boost that.
Some of these, like, I mean, you see it on the internet all the time, like this boosts your testosterone like 1,000-fold, or this boosts growth hormone by like 1,000. But then like with people, you go a little bit deeper and it's like, for half an hour or something like that. Like how much of some of these things, is that why they're kind of more simple, basic, stick to the same things that work? Because these sexy things on the internet are kind of just one-hit wonders. But like something like the sauna, is that a more of a, you have to do it consistently sort of thing, otherwise it is a bit more of a short-term thing? Yeah.
I mean, like looking at sauna, for example, like you're going to get that growth hormone boost, but then you're also going to get all these other cardiovascular benefits, all the other, it's like, it's not just like a reductionist, it's more of a like pleiotropic, a broad spectrum, beneficial effect on our biology.
Is that similar with the ice bath?
Yeah. I mean, ice bath is like whole body, sort of full body immersion in cold water, increasing brown adipose tissue, which is beneficial for metabolism and general, like reducing risk of type 2 diabetes. But I'd say definitely it's a pretty powerful sort of strategy for guys to incorporate.
What about things like creatine? I've seen, like you've talked about, like this newer-ish compound that's coming out that's kind of like creatine but better. What are the benefits? I guess firstly, starting off with just the basic creatine monohydrate, what are the benefits physically and mentally of that?
I personally think that creatine should be considered an essential nutrient, like we consider like vitamins.
Yeah.
So like if you look at a multivitamin formula, like you go to your local pharmacy, you'll see like there's B vitamins, and then you got vitamin A, D, E, K2. Then they'll throw in a few herbs and a few other things to just spice it up, make it look interesting. Creatine, in my opinion, should be considered like an essential compound. Now, the reason I say this is because literally last night I was on a Zoom call with the world leading expert on creatine. Like he's a absolute gun from Serbia. His name is Professor Ostojic.
I have to get a connection now, I reckon.
Oh yeah, I'll hook you up. He'd be down. He'd be down for the podcast.
Cool,
he'd be keen. And he was telling me about this website that he's developed called creatine.global. And if anyone's listening, they can check that out. And it goes through all the clinical trials on the benefits of creatine for all sorts of things, man, like mood, reducing risk of neurodegenerative diseases, helping with general ATP synthesis, but heart health, cardiovascular health, all that sort of stuff. And if we look at like the different types of creatines on the market, I'm sure you've been asked this numerous times, like, hey Jordan, what's the best creatine to supplement with? And you'd be like, well, creatine monohydrates, it is the most well-studied form.
Yep.
But what happens if you combine creatine monohydrate with the precursor GAA? So if you add because in the human body, GAA acts, it's called guanidinoacetic acid. If you take GAA, that creates more creatine in the human body. So if you stack those two together and create something called creatine, that combination there appears to be more effective than creatine monohydrate by itself.
Interesting. Is it how much of a benefit can we get from it? Like versus, you know, because some things is like you know, testosterone or whatever, or estrogen, you go, it's good up to here or it's good down to here. Like how much can you actually absorb the creatine? Like people, you know, they say take 5 grams a day, or if you're a bit bigger, take maybe a little bit more. If you're a bit smaller, take a little less. How much can you actually get benefit from versus, all right, now you're just wasting it?
Yeah. So the general principle for like athletes in particular is that 5 grams loading phase, and you pretty much just stay on that, and then maybe like 1 to 2 gram day maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to hit a saturation point with creatine, but what happens with this new form of creatine, this creatine with the GAA, it has, what's unique about it is that it has 4 ways to enter the cell, whereas creatine monohydrate, it can only enter the cell through one pathway, the creatine transporter 1. The unique benefit of this version is that it has a better affinity to get absorbed across the blood-brain barrier, which is a difficult thing for compounds to do.
Yep.
So I'd say like the main benefits we'd be seeing with creatine would be general neurological health, cardiovascular health, athletic performance without a doubt, building muscle, and a whole host of other benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like as a PT myself, everyone wants to take creatine for the muscle building effects and the getting a little bit more out of their performance in the gym. But ever since actually coming across like Louise Nicola, I think her name is, and like she slams down like the benefit of like for trying to reduce the likelihood of early onset Alzheimer's and dementia and other factors like this. And I don't think people really consider it for that reason. It's like, so for that office worker that we were talking about before that may not be training that often, it's like it's still a very beneficial supplement that you're going to get more out of yourself on a day-to-day basis, regardless of whether it's from a training point of view as well.
Absolutely. And in terms of the side effects, like a number of people, dude, I remember when I was 16, I was literally, I think I was in year 9, so I would have been 15 years of age. I was like, I remember because my dad's a pharmacist, right?
Yep.
Like, and so I used to work in my dad's pharmacy, but I'd just read a shitload of like supplementation books and shit like that. And I fell in love with it.
Makes sense why you're doing what you're doing
exactly.
now. Like,
like I was just so, and I'm still to this day, I'm like, spare time, taking a shit on the toilet, I'm researching.
Yeah. You're like, studies, what an interesting life. Friday nights, you're out in the beers, I'm studying. Wouldn't have it any other way.
Jeez, man. That pretty much defines me.
Yeah.
You know, I literally, the other day, I made my own health forum.
Yep.
Because I'm like, man, I can't just keep this information to myself. There's like studies that people would freaking love to see. So I set up this free health forum where I'm like, I want to see smart people just jumping in, sharing their 2 cents. You know, what are their thoughts on different stacks, different supplements? But if we go back to like, we're sort of talking about, so creatine, looking at the side effect profile, a number of people are like, because when I was young, I was like, I was paranoid about like the side effects.
Yeah.
Because when you're young, you just, your parents are like overlooking everything you do. And I remember I had this tub of creatine that had beta-alanine and also citrulline. And dude, I used to look forward to taking that so much. Like I would,
the tingles for sure.
the tingles would kick in, and I'd be like, it'd be like 3:30. We'd finish school, and I'd be like, training starts at 5:30, and I'm like, I'm so excited to take my first dose.
My tingles.
And I was so like addicted to the feeling of knowing that I'm enhanced.
Yeah,
it's that feeling. I think every guy loves that feeling of being like, I'm enhanced.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not having to sacrifice my health to do so. Like, it's that extra layer, which I guess is like, I mean, I've actually never, as much as people say, oh, bloating, water retention, whatever, I've never met someone that's actually said they noticed any bloating from creatine.
Yeah. And in terms of like the kidney health risks, it's really, like, dude, it'd have to be less than 5% of the population that would have to be careful.
Yeah. Of which you probably would have run into something that would remind you to be careful of that already if you've got your bloods done or something like that.
Yeah.
With the one barrier to, I've lost, the name of the
creatine?
Creatine. Would that be just because like creatine's also so amazing because it's so fucking cheap? Is that just adds a little layer of maybe a little barrier to entry for some people because that added cost potentially?
Cost wise, it's not a cheap ingredient like to add into creatine, but man, over time, the price will come down.
Yeah.
Like, we'll be smarter at ways to manufacture, and like, hopefully there's no Hopefully there's no, at the moment there's like an egg shortage. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. Bloody chickens. Come
I
on.
know. It's a killer for bodybuilders, man.
Yeah. They were going to the shops. Like, I can't get my 24
Exactly.
pack. Fucking hell, what's going on? So we mentioned then cognition there. What about like the effects of alcohol on cognition and testosterone and those factors there?
It's funny you mention that, man. Like, I have never been a fan of alcohol, but it's always been because like I always had soccer training. It was always like I always had soccer training, or I always had like a match the next day. My pretty much my parents and my dad would just say like, don't drink, it's gonna mess up your performance, which is I'm really grateful that he taught me that from a young age. But in terms of like how it's gonna hinder hormones, I think men need to realize that alcohol, and specifically beer, is going to make you more feminine. And the reason I say that is because beer in particular contains highly estrogenic compounds, which I know we said at the start, estrogen is important, but when you're soaking it up and smashing beers, like your body is going to prioritize those estrogens that are present in the hops in the beer, and it's going to put the body into a state of, even though they feel like they're more relaxed, it's a toxin. Alcohol's a known toxin.
So is it almost, you see the amount of like news articles, they rinse through going, 1 drink a night is good for you. No alcohol is good for you. 5 a week is good for you, whatever. Is it pretty much like a blanket rule that minus maybe the social benefit of drinking, there's no health benefits?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. I mean, for some people, they might say alcohol makes them feel a little bit more relaxed initially. But unfortunately, what can happen is if we're constantly, sort of drinking alcohol, it can bind to a receptor called the GABA receptor. And over time, it can start to downregulate that receptor, and you can actually become more anxious in the long run.
I feel like also it's never healthy to be solving something and like you become reliant on that then to feel relaxed. So therefore you don't feel relaxed unless you have that as well, which is probably coming from a self-proclaimed coffee addict as well. The exact same thing, like on the alter side. But I guess, coffee probably has some other added benefits as well.
Many benefits, man. I mean, we've seen studies that show that caffeine or coffee intake actually increases the most androgenic hormone in the body, DHT.
No, okay.
So, which is actually a benefit for a number of guys.
Yes. I was like only chatting with a friend yesterday. It was like, oh, you need to reduce your coffee. You're having too much. I'm like, nah, see, I knew this was going to come through. I'm fine. Is there a limit on that though? Like if you were to say how many cups of coffee before you go, obviously sleep could become impaired as well. But if you were making sure you finish drinking coffee before 12 o'clock, so that, the half-life still ran a couple of cycles before you went to bed, all those sort of factors there, is there still a point where you go, that's too much coffee or that's too much caffeine?
From the literature, what I've noticed is like, I feel like 300 to 400 milligrams a day is typically like the max that I think most people should be, like if they're really trying to stretch the limit, I think at that point it's like, you better hope that you're able to fall asleep,
Yeah, because then is that because even if you're stopping it early, you're still going to have the effects in your system?
Yeah. In some cases, it's going to sort of carry on. And also on that point there is like, there are actually certain foods that can delay caffeine excretion and also accelerate their excretion. So depending upon a person's diet and also like the genetic polymorphisms, some people are like considered like fast or slow metabolizers. I'm personally a very slow metabolizer. So, and I've also done a lot of like construction work on my brain to like make my brain hypersensitive to stimulants as well.
Is that just so you don't need as much?
Yeah.
You can just get away with very little, bang, get it done.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you did to make that work?
Oh, geez, Jordan.
Pandora's box has been opened.
Jeez. Well, I mean, from a pretty young age, I sort of understood that like if I can upregulate my dopamine receptors and keep them high for a long period of time, then I'm always going to be very sensitive to stimulants. And I've always wanted to be like that because I'm like, if I've got a PB, if I want to break a PB, either running or in the gym, or if I want to like be performing 150% above baseline, then I have a brain that is hypersensitive to stimulants. So then when I train or when I perform, I'm performing really well, not just like a little bit above. So basically what I did over the years, I'll mention maybe like 3 or 4 key supplements and nootropics that I've used that have actually had that effect. The first one is uridine monophosphate, which is, it's pretty ubiquitous, man. Like anyone can go ahead and order it off Amazon after listening to this. Uridine monophosphate at 250 milligrams a day. The second ingredient that I've leveraged a lot is called bromantane. And that's like a synthetic adaptogen from Russia. It's actually used to they actually use it for the cosmonauts and also for their military as well. So it makes them just animals.
Yeah,
like,
makes sense. That's what's in their water, not fluoride.
Yeah.
They've got this just streaming through at the bloody Russians. That's why they're crazy.
So they got that, and then also, so we've done uridine, bromantane, and what else have I also leveraged over the years? I mean, there's also a particular compound called coleus forskolin. That's also another one that's quite good at upregulating dopamine receptors.
Interesting. Now, on the topic of dopamine, I feel like it gets a terrible rap. People only think of dopamine as doom scrolling TikTok and this terrible thing that puts you in a terrible state. But you're kind of talking about leveraging dopamine a little bit more, using it and training yourself. Like, how can dopamine be a positive thing? What are those positive dopamine intakes?
Yeah, so one thing we need to realize about dopamine is that it's actually not necessarily the neurotransmitter that's released when you get a reward. It's actually the neurotransmitter that's really, really high just before you get the reward. Okay. So it's like, it's the chase.
Yep.
Guys love chasing. We love the chase.
On the grind, let's go.
Well, we love the chase. It's like hustle mentality. Yep. And if you're looking at like, so in particular, like what can a guy do to like increase his desire to win and to just kick ass in life? Well, it's optimizing dopamine, man, because if we listen to like the mainstream medicine system, which says, nah, we want to focus on serotonin, man, if you boost serotonin, you're going to reduce your motivation. You're going to reduce your testosterone. You're probably going to have IBS. You're going to have a slow metabolism. Your whole system will fall apart. Whereas if we're optimizing for dopamine, like I decided to do from a very young age, because I'm like, I want to build a company when I'm, in my 30s. Eventually I want to have like a highly successful business. And I'm like, what's going to help me get there? It's going to be testosterone, dopamine, and obviously all the other, lifestyle strategies and things like that.
Yep. So when people then say you're draining your dopamine because you're spending too much time on social media, what is actually happening there?
Yeah. So what's happening there is there's no effort being put in. So like we're receiving the dopamine hit without any actual effort put in. So like scrolling on TikTok, it's easy, man. Like I don't know about you, but it's
very easy. The thumb gets a workout, and that's about it.
It's an easy thing, but like if we, that's where the problem occurs, is when we're releasing dopamine without the effort. It's like that like there's the old school saying of like you want to earn it. You want to earn it. It's a nice feeling to earn rewards. It's a nice feeling to like work your ass off for 8 hours a day and make $3,000 a day. Like it's a beautiful feeling. So I think it's something that I think is it's oftentimes overlooked. And in terms of the, that rewarding feeling that you get when you like, you do something that you feel like, that rewarding feeling is actually governed by the opioid system. So it's actually the opioid system that's heavily released these opioid pathway that's activated during that reward.
So if you're looking for things that are going to boost that dopamine in the way that we want to boost it, it's a simple, like it's not necessarily the fact that it's sunlight or it's a workout. It's the fact that you had to put effort in to get something back.
Yeah,
very basic sort of.
Yeah, but you definitely will see an increase in dopamine from like going outside into the sun, because the vitamin D helps with that. You're going to see that from listening to like highly motivating music, or my favorite techno music.
Gets you going a little bit. Like, it's pretty hard not to the upbeat.
You're on. Yeah. I think there's with the techno music, aspect, I was like trying to understand like why do I love it? Like why do I just froth it so much? And like progressive house music, I just love it. Like Guy J and just all these awesome. So it's like I think the baseline actually reminds the body of when I was in the womb. The mother's heart. Have you heard that saying?
No, I haven't, but it's
like the mother's heart
sense,
beating is like rhythmic.
Yeah, okay.
It actually reminds you of the heart of so maybe like there's like a connotation there.
Yeah.
Like baseline makes you feel like you're at home or secure.
Yep. That's interesting because it was funny when I was speaking with Ben Cunt and he was we were talking about Hans Zimmer and we were both how like that is just gets us going. Like if you're in the gym, you're like staring at that barbell and Hans Zimmer just starts to bang on, you're like, oh, it's going to be a good session.
I love that.
Like, and once again, so it's probably just that you're just raising all those things, the dopamine, whatever it may be. But also especially there because you know you're hunting down something that is a challenge and there will be a reward at the end of that. So you can kind of see what's about to come as well.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure plays a bit of a role there. What about things like, is the same concept, ice baths, saunas, why people on the internet go crazy about how this is good for dopamine is because there is that challenge?
Well, if you look at like, for example, the like an ice bath, that's not comfortable, right? Like it's actually very uncomfortable, and most people have to endure the state of pain because pain and pleasure, they're on the same sort of wavelength in a sense. But like if you're looking at jumping into an ice bath, it's agony, it's difficult. Your body is releasing these feel bad. Well, I wouldn't say feel bad, but they're like dysphoric chemicals that your body then responds by getting stronger and more resilient. So like by doing something that's painful at the start of your day, like let's say 6 a.m. I know a lot of people that do it. You probably do as well. Like they start.
I'm an honest man. I hate ice baths. I'm not getting in one. Like, I'm not doing it.
Me too.
Maybe one day.
I'll happily ice my balls, but not.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like the ice bath's an easier option there. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, that's like in terms of like the resilience aspect. The body then becomes more resilient by jumping into the ice bath.
Yeah. So what's let's go down the icing of the balls. What's the theory there?
Yeah. Well, I think I've officially acclaimed the title that I'm the ice over balls guy. You've heard Knees Over Toes.
Yeah. About to go viral just for that.
The reason for that is because I've spoken about this probably on over 100 podcasts by now, but it's a really important subject that if any guy listening to this podcast, if you care about testosterone optimization from a natural point of view and you're not on TRT or you're not taking androgens, icing your balls 10 to 15 minutes 3 times a day is going to yield some pretty amazing effects in terms of testosterone optimization.
It sounds better than putting my anus up to the sky and the sun, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, even if that has benefit, it ain't happening. Like I'm not waiting for Google Earth to come over and catch me in my point of lacking. So is that from a testosterone boosting point of view? Like what's the kind of mechanism that's going on there?
Yeah, so both from a fertility and testosterone point of view, it's beneficial. So if we're looking at like the anatomy of the body, right? Like the testes are hanging outside the body for a reason because they need to be actually kept cooler than the core body temperature. So they're kept outside the body. Now, what happens is in the modern day society, men are wearing tight underwear, like we spoke before. They're either sitting with a laptop right on their lap, which is like terrible. And what's happening is all these different factors are leading to testicular overheating. So the testes get just a little bit too warm, and even a marginal 2 degrees too warm can completely shut off spermatogenesis and proper testicular functioning. So why is icing the balls actually beneficial? Well, we're getting that the ice pack's up against never against the skin, by the way. It's always up against the underwear. So you're applying ice to the underwear. You don't want to burn your balls.
Yeah, I'm like, shit. Non-polyester underwear, of course, as well.
What's happening is we're causing like a massive amount of like vasoconstriction. So like the blood vessels are constricting. And then what happens is when we release the ice pack, we're actually causing a rebound, like vasodilation, new blood flow and fresh oxygen being delivered to the testes. And that's what we believe to be is like the trigger for more testosterone production.
Interesting. So is that something that they're kind of like looking into a little bit deeper now? We've just recently seen something come to light that likely is beneficial, or is it pretty solid?
Most of the research on this sort of method is if you search nocturnal scrotal cooling, like that's the main, that's the fancy title. It's all fertility, man. Like we're seeing double, triple increases in sperm count just by doing that.
Wow. I'll consider icing my balls now. I mean, like, do I do it while I'm working? I was like, you're on a Zoom call and you're like, oh shit, that's a bit uncomfortable, isn't it? Now on the concept there of fertility, then, I think you recently did a YouTube video on it about like, men suffering from things like premature ejaculation. Obviously, there's a massive mental aspect of that as well, but is some of it physical also, or genetically?
Yeah. So the premature ejaculation is it's a really commonly discussed subject in terms of like men's health. What happens here is there are some key neurotransmitters that are actually too high that can actually evoke early ejaculation. One of them is actually histamine. So if histamine levels are quite high, let's say a guy actually suffers from like allergies or things like that, or histamine intolerance, there's a very good chance that he's also suffering from like premature ejaculation, because histamine it arouses like senses and sexual arousal. So in terms of ways to like dampen the, like, let's say we're trying to reduce the time it takes to ejaculate. Obviously there's like a mental component and the partner, the partner you're with, and whether or not
Attractiveness level,
whether she makes noises or not.
You're like, oh shit, you got me there.
Yeah. And the sort of words that she communicates.
You're like, oh, I read papers on a Friday night. Done. Game over.
It's gonna have an impact. But from a herbal medicine perspective, I mean, I'm a naturopath. Like I've studied herbal medicine inside out, and I love herbal medicine. There is a particular herb called burdock root that at least in these, there are no human clinical studies. There is one human clinical study in for rhodiola, reducing the time it takes to ejaculate, which is a good thing.
Yep.
Another herb is shilajit. Have you heard of shilajit?
No.
It's it's actually not really a herb. It's a mineral pitch that contains like fulvic acid, and that can have I gave it to one of my mates, and the sort of stories that I hear, they're just epic, man.
Positive stories,
yeah,
I'm assuming.
They're great. They're great. It's just, yeah, like he said, he just lasted too long.
He was like, no, I got to get rid of this shit. And what about on the flip side, I guess, is there like the erectile dysfunction side of things? Are there similar sort of, like, once again, massive mental part of it, but the physical also? Man,
there's a lot of components that come into ED. Like it could be blood flow issues, low nitric oxide. It could be too much serotonin, like I said before, not enough dopamine. It could be low testosterone. It could be low DHT. It could be high estrogen or low estrogen. It could be high prolactin. Like there's many different culprits.
Yep.
That's looking at it from like a neurobiological perspective. And then also like, I really think that like if a man feels successful in his career, I feel like that can also translate into bedroom performance as well. Like if you're feeling shit about yourself, man, like let's say you've had a pretty shit day and you feel like you've just been crushed by work and you're just deflated, like you're physically deflated down there as well. Like it's gonna translate into that aspect as well. So I think just having a good like mental health and having that good resilience is going to be important for general erectile function.
Well, I feel like it's, if you've had that same thing, the shit day or shit week, shit month, whatever it may be, your workouts through that period are pretty shit too.
Yep.
Like it's a physical activity. It's probably a similar sort of response mechanism that if you're struggling in those ways, you're probably going to struggle in the bedroom too. Like,
yeah. I also think a number of guys probably, they overlook this, but they don't believe the impact of certain foods on erectile function. And what I mean by this is like there are certain foods and herbs that are oftentimes found in like Chinese foods and Asian foods that can actually muck up sexual functioning quite a lot.
Okay.
Like for example, just smashing, heaps of green tea. If you look at the Asian monks, I don't even think they promote ejaculating.
So they're smashing green tea.
Yeah.
It's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. So like there are things in our like foods and certain herbs that can have like a dampening effect on sex drive.
Would I imagine stress play a big role in some of those as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like linking in, and also poor sleep as well.
Yep.
It's just going to drive up the sympathetic nervous system. But like if a guy can't set himself into that parasympathetic mode where he's like just properly relaxed, then he can't get an erection. That's going to be difficult.
But now that we've put the Chinese stores around here out of business, that's fine. You've actually mentioned like peptides and things like that. Now, to my complete understanding, I'm very oblivious to whether all peptides legal or some illegal, depending on where you are in Australia, and then leading down the path of what are some that maybe would be beneficial for people.
Yeah, so for most people listening in, they're probably familiar with BPC 157. That's like a really, really effective peptide that does not need to be injected.
Yeah.
Now, most peptides need to be injected to reap the benefits. And obviously that's an immediate like obstacle for 95% of the population. They don't want to inject. Like they just don't want to. So if we look at peptides, they're basically just a string of amino acids combined. And man, they are, I really do think that peptides are the future of medicine.
Yep.
And the reason I say that is because they're very specific in their action. Like, for example, if you look at BPC 157, amazing for gut health, amazing for injuries. Like, for example, myself, I tore my medial meniscus playing soccer. And I don't know how I found out about it. Within 6 months, I pretty much healed my torn meniscus using BPC.
That's pretty crazy.
Which is pretty profound. But in terms of like sourcing in Australia, it's not easy. Like and the TGA specifically, they don't make it easy. They've now scheduled BPC 157 as a prescription drug, which is
they're just trying to make some more coin out of it or make it a little bit harder so it pushes towards the other medications and whatnot, like the normal system stuff.
Yeah.
Without going too far down the conspiracy. That's all right. I'm probably with you on that one by the sound of it. So so they're legal but just a pain in the ass to get.
If like anyone's listening from the US, like there's one company in the US that I love. It's called peptidesciences.com.
Okay.
They're awesome. And also another company called science.bio. They're also two really high quality vendors.
So it's a lot easier over there for people to get their hands on it as well.
Yeah. And there's ways to get them, like, there are ways to get them here.
Yep.
You just have to pay a fortune,
Yeah. So are they, I don't know, peptides a fairly new thing, relative new being maybe the last decade or two that people are starting to look into more of, or they've been researched and been around for a while?
I would say in the last like maybe 5 to 10 years, Jordan, I think it's starting to like kick off and people are like, fuck, this stuff actually is powerful and legit. The most exciting ones, man, are going to be the fat loss peptides and also the energy enhancing ones, like the ones that increase, have you heard of NAD?
Yep.
The ones that actually increase the body's production of NAD like dramatically.
Which, sorry, for people that aren't familiar with it, what is that and what does it do?
Yeah, so NAD is increased when people take something called NMN. NMN is a really popular supplement. In fact, Dr. David Sinclair popularized the NMN plus metformin stack for anti-aging because NAD levels in general, for those listening in, you want to keep your NAD levels high as you age because NAD helps with energy production. It turns off bad genes and turns on the good genes. So it's something you want to actually make sure you've got in high amounts. The key thing with that is we can boost NAD by taking NMN, or we can take certain like peptides and small molecules. One of them is like 5-amino-1-MQ. I'm pretty much like I was the first to talk about it on YouTube, and now there's like heaps of companies selling it. But yeah, I definitely think peptides are the future of medicine.
Yeah. So is it just at the moment because they are a more recent sort of thing, we just don't have some of the long-term side effects potentially with some of those things?
Yeah. In terms of safety profile, if anything, they should have a stronger safety profile than some other sort of drugs and medications. But
Mm.
again, it's early days. Like maybe in the next 10 to 15 years, we'll start to see some legitimate, like really cool, like human clinical trials pop up.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who wants to fund these things because they're probably not going to fund the trials until they know they can make a shit ton of money out of it as well, which becomes a battle in itself. Like, are you familiar with the process of what it would take to try and like a trial is very expensive?
It's like it will be at least $2 million per clinical, a proper, like for a legitimate,
Yeah,
with a number of like a high number of participants, like at least 100. Yeah, no, it's not cheap, but the good news is that the research it's not slowing down. Like we're seeing more. I've got like keyword notification tools on my email, on PubMed.
Yep.
So I get notified anytime a new peptide study gets released.
So Friday night you can.
Yeah.
Like, that's the routine. Like Friday nights, bang, peptide talk. Let's
He's
go.
figured me out. He's figured me out already.
It's taken 60 minutes and we've done it. So I guess then when you're talking like fat loss, peptide, is ozempic, does that come under a peptide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so does insulin. Insulin's also like a peptide. But yeah, like if we're looking at Ozempic, it's funny you mention that because yesterday I was on a call with a company that's they've developed like a particular type of extract from hops from New Zealand that actually increases GLP-1, which is the sort of the appetite suppressant hormone, by up to 600% in humans. And the company, they literally said to me they've spent over $30 million researching this particular ingredient, and I'm like, I did
They're
some
invested, that's for sure.
I did some research on it, and I'm like, man, this has potential. Like who for? Well, it'd be for people who are always hungry. They just can't shut off their appetite. Like people that are on the verge of going onto Ozempic, but they don't want to be injecting once a week. And let's be honest, man, like Ozempic is not free of side effects. Like there are a shitload of side effects. It can cause in some participants, Ozempic can cause gastroparesis, which means the stomach literally can't move food.
Well,
Like it just freezes food. It will stop the stomach from moving food down into the small intestine.
Sounds far from ideal.
Which is not the best. But yeah, all I can say is this peptide space, and this is sort of the stuff that I like to cover on my YouTube channel, is like covering these new and novel peptides for human health.
Yeah, it's kind of the watch the space on some of them. Like coming to air, we're starting to see some people using them and starting to see some of the effects as well. I wonder, it would be interesting, I guess, time will tell whether does it still outperform what you would do naturally, all these sort of things as well. Like is it still going to be better off eating well, exercising, doing all those things? Like say the person that's struggling with appetite, like if you broke down their everyday, are there still things that they could be doing to improve that they just quote unquote can't be bothered?
Yeah. I mean, I think like with a lot of the things that I preach, I'm usually talking to people who've got the foundations right, and then they're trying to add the icing on the cake. And sometimes like some people are like, you know what, I do eat well, I do sleep well, I do train hard, and I do manage my stress, and I still want an edge. And it's like, all right, well, now we can sort of dabble with like peptides and nootropics and supplements and things like that.
Yeah, perfect. All right, well, I feel like there's a lot there for people to walk away with, Lucas. I really appreciate your time, and we'll leave any links to get in touch with you to work with yourself or any of your programs in the description below as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me,
Thank
man.
you.